There's three hypothetical price scenarios that I'm thinking about right now when it comes to Moonbeam's utility token called Glimmer. And this is even maybe assuming, let's say, there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle. Only time will tell, but again, this is just what I have on my mind. But even though nothing I say is financial advice, what is the first scenario that I do want to explore when it comes to Glimmer? And that is Glimmer at the price of $1.50, which is around a 22x from here, and market cap at that point, if we were to consider the current circulating supply, would be around $1.5 billion. The reason why this wouldn't necessarily surprise me is because I like Moonbeam's fundamentals, and let me explain what I mean by that. When it comes to Moonbeam, it is a Polkadot parachain, and it enables full Ethereum compatibility within a Polkadot parachain environment. However, if I just want to put it in very simple terms, the way you take a look at it is that basically Moonbeam offers the power of Polkadot while at the same time maintaining the ease of use of Ethereum. If I were to again put it quite simply, that's the way I would take a look at it. Now, why do I think it's pretty interesting? It's because Ethereum is very popular, right? But when it comes to Polkadot, I also think it's pretty popular too. Maybe not as popular as Ethereum, but it's pretty massive. And also, I like the utility when it comes to Polkadot. Let me explain why. When it comes to Polkadot, it's basically focused on something called interoperability. It's focused on connecting blockchains together. Many networks out there, many blockchains out there, because a lot of them are independent of one another. Some of them can't freely send data and value to each other, and as a result, if that is the case, they do lack interoperability. Because you know what? Even if we take a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, very massive, right? But because they're independent of one another, they cannot freely send data and value to each other. In that instance, arguably, they do lack interoperability. What steps in, quite essentially? Something like Polkadot. So again, when something like Moonbeam offers the power of Polkadot while maintaining the ease of use of Ethereum, I think that is pretty cool. Now, I do want to talk about something else, which I think kind of complements something like Moonbeam. But in order for this to be kind of, I think, more relatable, I first have to explain something called Kusama and its relation to Polkadot. And I think it's going to make sense later when I talk about Moonbeam and something called Moonriver. But even besides that, let me explain this real quick. Polkadot has a canary network called Kusama. Now, Kusama, basically, it's a canary network in a sense where the way I would take a look at it, projects that usually want to launch on Polkadot, they're going to typically launch on Kusama first. However, later on, after the project is kind of good to go, so to speak, later it's moved on to something like Polkadot. But it's not a requirement though. But then again, a lot of projects out there do usually kind of do this from what I see. And I think the reason why, the way you take a look at it, is that it's supposedly easier to make changes on when it comes to Kusama when compared to Polkadot. And also it's allegedly cheaper to rent building space as well when compared to Polkadot. So again, it's kind of like a funneling system the way you take a look at it. However, keep in mind, right, I don't think it is a requirement for a project to move on later to Polkadot. Like for instance, we take a look at Moonriver. Now again, this is how it kind of relates to Moonbeam. If we take a look at it, Moonriver, which is on Kusama, it's a canary network to Moonbeam. So then the way I view it is that it's pretty cool. Again, Polkadot has a canary network called Kusama, Moonriver is on Kusama, and then Moonbeam's on Polkadot, and then Moonriver is a canary network to Moonbeam. But then again, Moonriver is basically kind of like the Kusama to Polkadot, but then to Moonbeam, if that makes sense. So I kind of like this overall. If I believe in Polkadot, the way you take a look at it is that why wouldn't I believe in Moonbeam? This is just arguably my perspective. I'm not telling them to do anything. But then if I believe in Polkadot, then why wouldn't I believe in its canary network called Kusama? But then Moonriver is on Kusama and it's a canary network to Moonbeam. So then again, I'm just kind of like believing in four projects quite essentially by just believing in Polkadot. That's the way to take a look at it. But even besides all that, I like the utility when it comes to Moonbeam, and also I do like the sort of direction in which Polkadot is heading. So then maybe when it comes to Glimmer at the price of $1.50, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me in an event where maybe, let's say, there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season. But then even besides that, the second scenario that I do want to explore is $1.75, which is around a 26x from here. Now, the market cap to consider the current circulating supply at that point would be nearly 1.8 billion, which doesn't seem like too outlandish to me. I mean, I've seen Shiba Inu reach around a $40 billion market cap, and that was years ago back in 2021. I don't think this seems that ridiculous, but again, this is just my thought process when it comes to this. And now the third and final hypothetical price scenario that I do want to explore is maybe the idea of $2, which is nearly a 30x from here, and market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around 2 billion. Now, the way I take a look at it is that it doesn't seem, again, like such an outlandish market cap to me, and also on top of that, I take a look at the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF, and also I take a look at the amount of enterprise adoption, combined with how there are supposedly over 600 million crypto owners currently, which is supposedly more than ever before in history. If we did see a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle, maybe at the price of $2 when it comes to Glimmer, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me, but this is just my thought process. However, what is the timeline I'm looking at? For me, I don't think I'll be able to know the perfect exact moment because only time will tell, but at least I can take a look at some clues from the past. It doesn't mean it's going to happen the exact same way this time around though, but it's just something I'm exploring nonetheless. For instance, the last Bitcoin halving event happened in April of last year, in 2024, so if I consider how usually altcoins typically as a worst case scenario, they usually peak around a year and a half after a Bitcoin halving event. A year and a half from that moment would be October of 2025. Now, we're not in October yet, granted, so then only time will tell, but even if it extends like all the way till December of this year, maybe even next year, like Q1 or something like that, of 2026, like January, February, March, again, around that timeline, I'm staying patient anyways, so I'm not necessarily complaining because I knew I was going to have to wait for quite a while. The way I did my kind of strategy by just dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting, I knew there was going to be a lot of waiting involved. So it is what it is, but I'm just staying patient. Again, I'm not telling anyone to do anything when it comes to Glimmer, but this is just my kind of view when it comes to Moonbeam. However, again, that's pretty much about it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch you all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.